Hello everyone, this is Timothy Mark with Alexandria.
How's everybody doing today?
And we got an awesome podcast for you today. But before we get into that, I know that on a few of our podcasts we promote our books and other things that we have going on. We are a World Paranormal Research Society. The website's worldparanormalresearchsociety.org, O-R-G. And the Gmail is worldparanormalresearchsociety@gmail.com. If you want to, make complaints, say nice things, whatever, email us. Have any requests, email us. Alright, what I want to start talking about today is I used to have an author in one of the companies I have, which is Timothy Mark Presents. It's a film company done horror films and things of that nature. And one of the authors that we just parted ways with is a guy named Alan E. Anthony, and he did a book called Attack of the Killer Bitches. Now what I like to say is we parted ways on good terms. We had it published for a couple of years, and to my knowledge the book's going to be re-released this year at some point, so I definitely check that one out. Y'all may see it on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles right now, the link to it. However, it is not available, so if you try to buy it, you can't buy it right now. But it will be re-released, and that's by Alan E. Anthony. It's called Attack of the Killer Bitches. So what we're going to talk about today is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now we're currently in Texas, and when you tell somebody that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre did not actually occur in the state of Texas, it's like you're stealing their cheeseburger before they had time to compact it into a turd. And so, I mean, they get real red-assed about it, as Roy D. Mercer would say. They get the case. Okay. They get the case of the red ass when you tell them that. But they swear up and down, oh, the house that it happened in, you can go do tours there. No people.
So you mean to say that those people would be ready to give you an ass whooping? For bursting their bubbles?
Yes. They swear up and down because they can go to this house. It's not the house that an actual crime happened in. What it is the house that the first movie took place in. And they had turned it into a restaurant. Now they've opened it for tourism and stuff like that. But it's very interesting when you try to tell these people, these uneducated people, that Tobe Hooper, who did the film, and the reason why he did it in Texas is because he was a UT student at the time, and so it's more convenient for him to shoot the film in Texas. But that film is actually based off of Ed Gein. Ed Gein was a guy who lived in Plainsville, Wisconsin, and there's no written record or any kind of record that he'd actually ever been to Texas. However, he was a real-life Leatherface. He really wore the mask, and he really cut people up. But he did not use a chainsaw. He did not use a chainsaw to cut people up. What happened was Tobe Hooper was in a hardware store one day, and he already had the script for the film finished and things of that nature, getting ready to do the film, and he looked over and seen a chainsaw, and that's how he decided to incorporate a chainsaw not only in the title but into the film. And years later, because after Ed was arrested, he died at actually of old age. So he was put into a mental health hospital. Years later, they asked Ed would he had ever used a chainsaw, and he said no. And then the reporter asked, well, why? And he said it would have been too messy, because when you cut, the way that he would cut his people up is he would string them up in the barn, and gut them like you would gut a deer.
So like dressing a deer carcass, as they call it. Yeah,
he would gut them and everything, and but he used every part of the body. And he did not believe in wasting the flesh, which is what would have happened had he used a chainsaw, because the meat would have flew back actually and covered him and everything. So he was a very interesting person.
I would say a very unique human being, for a lack of better words. I mean, I think I seen a picture of him prior to him passing away when he was in old age, and he really looked like a very docile old man that you could have a conversation with, and you would never in a million years think that he was this brutal killer. I just didn't get that from looking at his picture. But I mean, who knows what a killer really looks like? I mean, it's hard to place that. But he didn't come off as a brutal killer. He just seemed like a very sad old man.
And yeah, and well, you know, and he was a very sad old man. And I wrote the book called The Ed Gein Story. If you Google it, The Ed Gein Story by Timothy Mark. It's actually on Barnes & Nobles, and it's on Amazon, and I'll put the link in the description below. But it's very interesting that he was actually the one, and these murders happened in Plainsville, Wisconsin. Again, I wrote the book on it. If you're interested, check out the link below. But for a minute, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. A franchise, whenever you hear the term franchise, when it refers to a film like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Final Destination, or anything like that, a franchise is something that, one, either you have more than one film made about it, so you have 2 or 3 films, or you have one film with tons of merchandise. So tons and tons of merchandise. So it's definitely a franchise, and it's a film that was made in 1974, which is the same year that I was born, and it was written and co-produced by Tobe Hooper, and Kim Hinkle, and it stars Marilyn Burns, Paul A. Partain, Edwin Neal, Jim Sadow, and Gunnar Hansen. And Gunnar Hansen actually played a few different characters in that film. He played Sally Hardesty and Leatherface, and so yeah, it's basically one of the most frightening films to come along at that time, and it was released October 1st, 1974. The budget for the film was $300,000. That does not mean that they spent the whole $300,000 to film the film. That was the film's budget, estimated $300,000, and during that time in the 70s, $300,000 was a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of films, it was not a lot of money, because films at that time were costing millions of dollars to make, and so this was considered a low budget independent film. So yeah, you're kind of quiet over there.
Well, I was going to go into part of the film, and I didn't know when you were going to stop, so I didn't want to interrupt you. You're just going on and on and on. But
yeah, well,
for inflationary purposes, at that time in 1974, like Timothy said, $300,000 was the budget, and the box office take, they're saying, was $30.9 million. And then Hooper is said to have used a cast of relatively unknown actors, and he drawn mainly from Central Texas, where the film was shot. And it says that the limited budget forced Hooper to film for very long hours, 7 days a week, so that he could finish as quickly as possible to reduce, I guess, the equipment rental costs. So when you're renting equipment, you want to get done with the equipment as soon as possible. And I think it's for a lot of you, I kind of like the theatrical release poster, and it says right on there, who will survive and what will be left of them. And then it has the gentleman with the awesome chainsaw on the theatrical release poster. I kind of really like that poster. And if you haven't seen it, the film follows a group of friends who fall victim to a family of cannibals while on their way to visit an old homestead. And although it was marketed as a true story to attract a wider audience, it was plot is it's fictional. So they're trying to market. Is that what they're trying to do? They're trying to market it as a true story, so it would be more horrific and akin it to Ed Gein. Is that not correct? So it would be a marketing ploy.
Yeah, it was a true story. I mean, you know, there was a Leatherface. A lot of the things in the film that happened to cannibalism and things of that nature happened. But it didn't happen with a family of killers. What it happened with was one man, Ed Gein. But at the time, there was a lot of pressure on Henley to, not Henley, but there was a lot of pressure on
Hooper?
Hinkle,
Oh.
Kim Hinkle, to relate it somehow to Texas, since it actually happened in Wisconsin. So in a newspaper article, this is a direct quote from Kim Hinkle. He said, "I definitely studied Gein, but I also noticed a murder case in Houston at the time, a serial murderer you probably remember named as Elmer Wayne Henley." So he based it off of Gein, and to satisfy the Texans at the time, he threw in the name Elmer Wayne Henley. And Henley was a young man who recruited victims for an older homosexual man. I saw some news reports where Elmer Wayne said, "I did these crimes and I'm going to stand up and take it like a man." Well, that struck me as interesting, that he had this conventional morality at that point. He wanted it known that now that he was caught, he would do the right thing. So this kind of moral schizophrenia is something I tried to build into the characters. However, that's the only part of Elmer Wayne Henley that he had that was related to the movie, was the fact that the victims, if you notice, there's an old man that they try to feed Grandpa in the movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so that's parts based off of Elmer Wayne Henley. And so, but other than that, Leatherface himself was based off of Ed Gein. So yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to note too that due to the film's violent content, Hooper struggled to find a distributor. So and then upon its October 1974 release, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was banned outright in several countries, and numerous theaters later stopped showing the film in response to numerous complaints about its violence. And while it initially drew a mixed reception from critics, it was enormously profitable, grossing, again, like I said, over $30 million at the domestic box office. And it gained a reputation as one of the best and most influential horror films in cinema history.
I know when I was interviewed, when I released my book, The Ed Gein Story, I was interviewed by Trav and Vic from the Drunken Horror Show. And Vic was a big time Gunnar Hansen fan. Now me, being a filmmaker, I've done horror conventions where I had the opportunity to meet Gunnar Hansen in person, and I can tell you the guy was a complete asshole. He was not really that friendly with the fans. Although you have these fans that are starstruck when they meet him. And so they did not realize that he was being a complete asshole because they was just so starstruck. But the guy was an asshole. And in that interview, I actually said I did not like Gunnar Hansen. And it wasn't that long after that Gunnar Hansen ended up dying. So I ended up looking like an asshole myself for saying that in the interview. But the film was filmed in a 1900s farmhouse on Quick Hill Road near Round Rock, Texas. Now, anybody familiar with Texas, you know the Williamson County Police. They got a case of they got picked on when they were in school and shit of that nature, and just really try to ticket anybody they can up there. Williamson County really sucks with their law enforcement.
So, for the listeners out there that may not know that, what's a major city near Round Rock?
Austin.
There you go.
Round Rock, Texas is north of Austin.
So they can kind of put that on a map, put it on the scope. And here's a statement that I want to kind of throw out to you and see what you think on it. It said that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is credited with originating several elements common in the slasher genre, including the use of power tools as murder weapons and the characterization of the killer as a large, hulking, faceless figure. What do you think about that? So what they're telling in that statement, this was the beginning of slasher films, and having the characteristics, or having the killer in various films as this large, huge, faceless figure or creature. What do you think about that? Do you think that began...
What, Leatherface?
Yeah.
He's not a faceless. He's wearing two faces, but yeah.
Well, they're considering a human face not there. So it's faceless.
It was there. It was definitely there. If you look at it, it was definitely there. As a matter of fact, on the cover of my book, if you look at the cover of my book, the real Leatherface, the real face that Ed Gein wore was in a box near the front door when the police came in to arrest him. And actually, they took a picture of it, and I have it on the cover of my book, and it's the real face, and it really looks like a face. Because the budget was so low at the time, some of the blood in the film, and when you see Grandpa being fed the blood, some of the blood was actually real. And at one point, they actually cut the finger of the actor with a razor to get real blood out of him.
And I think one of the scenes, or one of the things that strikes me, I mean, I have a fascination with bones and stuff, but there's a scene where Leatherface suddenly appears and he kills the character of Kirk with a hammer, and then Pam enters soon after that, and she trips and falls into a room filled with furniture made from human bones. And then when she attempts to kind of run away, Leatherface catches her and impales her on a meat hook, making her watch as he butchers Kirk with the chainsaw.
And that is awesome. That meat hook scene was a very awesome scene. The lady that played that role, she actually did an interview with Trav and Vic as well, and I was friends with her. I don't know if it was on Twitter or Facebook. I've had so many different accounts, but the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre was very scary. But my favorite was the one that came out in 1986, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. And then in 1990, you have Leatherface. That movie, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that movie had, God dog, what's that actor's name? Now I can't even remember the actor's name. Blonde hair, there's always hair.
I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure who you're referring to.
I can't think.
It'll come to you. It'll come to you.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Well, what's the scene? And because I'm bringing sort of, I want you to bring a likeness to this. Sally is gagged, and then Leatherface is now dressed as a woman. He serves dinner, and wasn't there in the Ed Gein story? Did he not dress in women's clothes, or am I mistaking him with another serial killer dressing in women's clothes?
Yeah, he did. And going back to Ed Gein, now we're bouncing around from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, because there's similarities.
Well, yes, based on Ed Gein, but what I'm saying is with the Ed Gein story, the way he was raised, yeah, he was kept away from girls and things of that nature. And actually, when he met a girl he liked, he killed her, and that was the crime scene photo where she was already being gutted in the garage. So yeah, he did not know. I guess Matthew McConaughey was the name of the guy that I'm thinking about, and he was in the 1994 film, which would have been the fourth film. It's called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. It starred Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, and they were both in that film. But I would like to continue on a timeline here. So let's do the timeline again since I backtracked. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 1, 1974. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, 1986. Man, that was one that was awesome because 1986 was a very good year for me. I was a teenager. Great year. Well, I was 12. Yeah, I was a teenager. And then Leatherface Part 3 was in 1990. Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 4 was 1994. And then in 2003, what you have is a reissuing of the franchise and a rebooting of the franchise. And here's where I think they start to screw up a little bit when they start trying to redo the things. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, again, the reboot was in 2003, and then you have another one, which the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 2006, and then you have Texas Chainsaw 3D in 2013, and then you simply have Leatherface in 2017. So yeah. So
you're talking about the timeline on that, but I want to go back a little bit more back in time in regards to the film. Actually was originally rated as X, and after several minutes were cut, it actually received an R rating. And here's sort of the public reaction on this particular film. In San Francisco, cinema goers walked out of theaters in disgust. and February 1976, 2 theaters in Ottawa, Canada were advised by local police to withdraw the film or they would face morality charges. So that's in 1976, Ottawa, Canada. 2 theaters were told by the local police that if they didn't take the film away or withdraw the film, they would face morality charges. And after its initial British release, including a 1-year theatrical run in London, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was initially banned on the advice of the British Board of Film Censors. And while the British ban was in force, the word chainsaw itself was barred from movie titles, forcing imitators of the movie to rename their films. So that's kind of influential, where at that particular time you are not allowed to use the word chainsaw in a movie title. That's censorship at its greatest. Like,
well,
what
no,
the heck?
you got to look at it in a time period, though. Okay, like I said,
that's 1976.
I've made 3 full-length feature horror films myself. If I could ever get somebody to kick my film out of a theater in disgust, that would be awesome. And as Tobe Hooper had to be really proud of that, because man, that's like William Castle, the guy that did The Tingler and the original 13 Ghosts. He tried to get his films kicked out, and that was back in the 50s and 60s. He would try to get his films kicked out. He would try to get the audience to leave. And so that's like winning an award for a film producer.
Well, that's creating more hype to it and more draw to your particular film. And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre really received a mixed reaction upon its initial release. And Linda Gross of the Los Angeles Times called it despicable and described Henkel and Hooper as more concerned with creating a realistic atmosphere than with its plastic script. And Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times said it was as violent and gruesome and blood-soaked as the title promises, yet praised its acting and technical execution.
I'd like to say this. I'm about to mention the name of somebody and give them a little bit of publicity here that doesn't actually like me. And let me tell you why he doesn't like me, okay? Again, I was a filmmaker, and this guy wanted his son to be in one of my horror films. With that being said, when I met his son, he had no acting ability. He didn't have any kind of looks to him. There was nothing that I could do with his son. He had this dream of being an actor, and there was nothing that I could do with his kid. And so we had a falling out over that, but I'm going to throw his name out there. His name's Robert, and he owns Robert's Flat Top Shop in Austin, Texas. If you ever want a real good flat top, Robert is the one to go to. Not only did I go there, but also IFBB pro bodybuilder Lee Priest went there. And when you see his old photos when he was living in Austin of him having his flat top, Robert was the guy that was doing it. And so, and the reason why I'm bringing up Robert's Flat Top Shop and Robert, the barber, is because he actually is a taxidermist as well. And when they were doing the first film, Robert's the guy that was putting the animals on the set. And he was using real animals, yeah.
Interesting.
And yeah, that was very interesting because actually Robert's Flat Top Shop is right on, kind of on the line of, it's on Palmer Lane, so it's right the borderline of Austin and Pflugerville. It's not too far away from where they were shooting the film at all. Absolutely.
That's pretty interesting. And more kind of takes in the time frame of what people thought the film was. John McCartney of Cinefantastic stated that the house featured in the film made Bates Motel look positively pleasant by comparison. So I kind of like that.
Yeah, I like Bates Motel, and I would have liked the house with the. And what's interesting, if you look at the house that I put in my book, the actual home that these things happen in, if you look at the house that's in there, it looks very similar to the house that they shot the movie in. It's kind of got that same feel. And,
yeah, but moving forward later on, too, a lot of critics later frequently praised both the film's aesthetic quality, and its power, observing that it managed to be horrifying without being a total bloodbath.
And
so
here,
that says a lot.
And here you have a college student who's at the University of Texas who was able to make one of the most horrific horror films of all time that scared people of my generation. I mean, you know, my favorite film, again, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, my favorite film of that franchise. And I can remember, man, that as a teenager, I think I was 12, 13, when I seen that film, and that film just scared the shit out of me. I mean, it gave me nightmares, and but I loved it.
Okay, but a lot of films out there, a lot of horror films, like if you ever watch a film, maybe do this with the next film that you're planning on watching or a movie, a lot of films have very subtle touches in them, and you have to be really watching closely. And Mike Emery of the Austin Chronicle praised the film's subtle touches, such as a radio broadcast heard in the background describing grisly murders around Texas in the film. So go back and watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'm not sure what scene, but it is a radio broadcast in the background.
But the whole reason for us doing this podcast is to let people know the Texas Chainsaw Massacre did not happen in Texas. Leatherface never lived in Texas. This happened in Plainsville, Wisconsin. And the Leatherface, the real name of Leatherface is Ed Gein. Google him, and you can just picture him, like you said, you described him a while ago, Ed Gein, the real guy. But imagine him if you come across him wearing the apron and the mask.
When I see him,
the actual face,
sad old man, I could never picture him as doing that.
And so we're going to switch gears and more focus on Ed right now.
Well, can I just make one more comment about, I mean, everybody that likes horror, I'm a huge Stephen King fan, but this is in the words of the horror novelist Stephen King, what he said about the film. He goes, "I would happily testify to its redeeming social merit in any court in the country." So I'm saying that he gave a thumbs up for Texas Chainsaw Massacre by the horror novelist Stephen King.
Now we want to switch it to Ed Gein, the guy that the film was based off of. Okay, so one of the things that Ed Gein would do, as I said, not only would he cut their skin, okay, I talked about it in the last podcast, but I'll talk about it in this one too. The three horror films that are made off of the Ed Gein story is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, Norman Bates, and I'm talking about the original Psycho, Norman Bates, and Hannibal. So the things that Ed Gein would do is not only would he cut their face off and sew it where he could wear their skin and try to be like them, where he would try to be like a woman or whatever, because it was a female face. But he would also take their skulls of his victims. He'd take the skulls of his victims. Not just that he just killed people, but he dug up corpses too. And he would take the skulls and make cereal bowls out of them and eat cereal from their skulls. That picture, I have a picture of one of his skulls bowls in the book as well. And what he would also do is make lampshades out of human skin. And he had a belt made out of human skin as well. And then he would eat the meat. So he was definitely a very interesting guy. Interesting guy.
I'll go into a little bit of, if you are not familiar with Ed Gein, his full name was Edward Theodore Gein. He was born August 27th, 1906, died July 26, 1984, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield. He was an American murderer and also a body snatcher. And it says that Ed Gein had exhumed corpses from local graveyards and again fashioned the trophies and keepsakes from the bones and the skin. So very, very lost human being, I would say, and very, very troubled. And his cause of death was, they say, respiratory and heart failure due to cancer. And
well, he was very old when he died. How old was he when he died? I forgot. It's been a while since I wrote the book. But
he died at age 77.
So he was 77, and an old guy, a guy who never went to prison for these crimes. He only went to a mental hospital. And he pretty much lived most of his days happy, actually. to be around people, because in my book I talk about the fact that when Ed was a kid, his family had a grocery store in town. It was in a different town, and they had a grocery store, but the mother, as the kids were getting older, got so obsessed with keeping her kids, in the name of religion, keeping her kids away from friends and anybody, that she decided to sell the grocery store, and they bought land in his home. His dad was a drunk, and if I was married to a woman like that, I'd be a damn drunk too. But his dad actually died fairly young as an alcoholic, and so it just left him, his brother, and his mother. Well, his mother, like I said, did not want him to have girlfriends, anything of that nature. We're talking about how nasty girls were. Pretty much what Norman Bates' mother would say in the movie Psycho.
Yeah, but it says that she was very, very religious. She was Lutheran, and
she was. That's
she
what
preached
they said
to her boys about the immorality of the world, the evils of drinking, and her belief that all women except herself were prostitutes, were naturally prostitutes, and instruments of the devil.
And that goes back to the guy who wrote the Psycho book, and it wasn't Alfred Hitchcock, but the guy who wrote the Psycho book that Alfred Hitchcock made the movie off of. He based it off the Ed Gein story, and he had this information. And if one of the things that Alfred Hitchcock could not show at the time that he did this 1960s version of Psycho was some of the things that was in the book, which was Norman and his mother having a sexual relationship. I think it's not until part 3 that you see them have a sexual relationship. In Bates Motel, you've seen a lot of that sexual tension between the mother and the son in the television series. But in the case of Ed Gein and his mother, there was a sexual relationship.
Well, it's really sad because it is said to make matters worse, when he was growing up, that his mother would punish him whenever he tried to make friends. And despite his very poor social development, he did fairly well in school, particularly in reading. And his dad died in 1940 of heart failure caused by his alcoholism, and he was 66 years old. So
which was fairly young for back then, because if you look at people, people used to live longer back then. People would live like into their late 80s and things of that nature. Now people are dying at like 66 and things of that nature.
But Ed had a brother named Henry. Did Ed kill his brother Henry?
Yes, he did. What happened was this. Okay, they were out in the field. There was a fire out in the field. They were out in the field putting out the fire, okay? Henry started talking to Ed about his sexual relationship with his mother, who was also Henry's mother. This pissed Ed off so much that he actually hit Henry in the back of the head with a shovel and killed him. Well, the fire marshal or whoever ruled it an accidental death. The coroner at that time and the fire marshal actually ruled it an accidental death. But the thing is, it was later on after he was captured that he admitted to the homicide of killing his brother.
That's pretty horrific. And after that time, then of course that him and his mother were totally alone. And actually, didn't he have
yeah, he was dicking her down every day probably. But the whole thing to this is, not only was she his mother, but she was also his lover. And let me tell you this, okay? I think what people have to realize is Ed had a vehicle. He could travel. And one of the things that I'm doing is I'm coming out with the Ed Gein story part 2. But I'm really taking a while to do this because I'm researching the missing people in the surrounding towns and cities that went missing and has never been found. I believe the number of people that Ed was responsible for killing was actually high. Although it's only 2 or 3 people that people believe that he actually killed, and he dug up the rest of them. But if you look at where Ed lived and look at how many people went missing in the surrounding cities and towns, it'd be very plausible for Ed Gein to be their abductor and killer.
And it said that Ed was just completely distraught by his mother's death, and one author wrote that Ed Gein had lost his only friend and his one true love.
And the way I put it in my book, which is different than if you go get some book that they're going to sugarcoat it and they're going to say it to make it for a mass audience. mine is for a very hardcore audience, and I put it the way it is. I said not only did Ed lose his mother, but he also lose the only piece of pussy that he ever known his entire life. So this was a double-edged sword for him when she died. And so with that being said, what Ed did is the same thing they based the Norman Bates character off of doing. Keep in mind, Ed Gein existed before Psycho was written. So, you know, you have to, what Ed Gein did with his mother's room is he made his mother's room immaculate, and then he boarded it up. So it was immaculate. Like, it was the only room, when the cops raided the house, every room in the house was rotted, deteriorating, just filthy and pretty much condemnable. Except for his mother's room, it was immaculate.
Okay, but when you're talking about that too, when the authorities searched the house, this is some of the things that they found. They found whole human bones and fragments, a basket made of human skin. There was human skin covered chairs, skulls on the bedposts. Right. There was bowls, like you said, from human skulls. A corset was made from a female torso, skinned from the shoulders to the waist. There was leggings that was made from human leg skin, and masks again from. So, what is he? Was he trying to make? Yeah, female parts of females incorporated in his furniture.
No, what he was trying. Okay, he was taking skin and he was making furniture with it. This is true, but he was also making a suit. A suit of a female, because, and this is my theory as the author of the Ed Gein story, is that I believe that Ed Gein was somebody, because he'd been sheltered by his mama for so long, I believe he is somebody who wanted to eventually become a woman.
So he'd be the first transsexual?
Not the first transsexual, but he'd be one of the
earlier ones.
Yeah,
that were, because
he had the face, the leather face was a female face, and again, look at the cover of my book, the face is on there. This the real face, it's the real leather face, and like you said, the leggings made of skin. So he was making himself into a female, so he could feel like a woman,
and there was also a belt made from female nipples.
Yeah, and it was one of the things that he did. One of the things that Texas Chainsaw Massacre, if you go back, one of the movies has Leatherface almost as a transsexual, but that was closer to the way that Ed Gein was. It wasn't the first 3 movies that did that, but I think it was one where Leatherface looks like a woman, and when he did that. That was what Ed Gein, the real Leatherface, was doing.
Oh, and actually too, when he was questioned, Gein told investigators that between the years of 1947 and 1952, he made as many as 40 nocturnal visits to 3 local graveyards to exhume recently buried bodies. And he said he was sort of like in a daze-like state when he was actually doing that.
I mean, it must have been a beautiful thing for him. I mean, you know, digging up the body and having the body there. But also I think that it, you know, again, I'm coming out with a sequel to my book. But again, there was a lot of people that went missing in the surrounding that was never been found. And I'm trying to link those people that went missing to being abducted and killed by Ed Gein, which is extremely difficult to do. But I am trying to do it.
But I think there's another perspective here, and maybe you can challenge me on that, or you can correct me. And it says, on other occasions, he dug up the graves of recently buried middle-aged women he thought resembled his mother. And then he took their bodies home, where he tanned their skins to make his collectibles. So he was trying to be remembered of his mother by all these other pieces of body parts. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, as he dug them up, I mean, also before he started cutting them up, I'm quite sure that he infiltrated their holes, their orifices. So yeah, I think that he had a party with them. I think that he may have had an orgy with dead women. So you know, I mean, think about it. If anybody's going to dig up a body, I mean, what would you do with it? If you reach the mentality, if that's what you want to do, that's your mentality, then would you not also fuck the corpse?
Well, it says here that says after his mother's death, he began to create again a woman's suit so that he could become his mother, to literally crawl into her skin.
Well, you know, that's somebody else's opinion.
Opinion.
I don't think he was trying to become his mother. I think he was simply trying to become a woman. I don't think he was trying to become his mother, because he would have just did that to his mother's body, where he kept his mother's body intact. And actually, he had dug up his mother and kept her intact. And then when they found her, they had to rebury her. But yeah, that's you're operating on an opinion.
Right.
He's never said that in any interview that I've read, any of the research that I've done on Ed Gein prior to writing the book. He's never said that he wanted to become his mother. And my theory, and with all the evidence and research that I've done on this story, is that he actually wanted to become a female. And you know, I think he was trying his damnedest to become one.
And it's interesting to note that the car that he used to haul the bodies of his victims was sold at public auction for $760 to a carnival sideshow operator, Bunny Gibbons.
The cauldron that Ed Gein had, that Ed Gein actually cooked some of the body parts in, was bought by none other than Zach Bagans. Zach Bagans has it in his haunted museum, or at least he had it in his haunted museum. He may have it in his home now. But he actually purchased Ed Gein's cauldron.
Well, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That would be, I mean, he's just one of those, I think, lost souls that became kind of spurned to do these awful things because of his upbringing, a very twisted, demented upbringing by an overly religious mother that wanted to keep her child, I guess, to herself.
Her children to herself, but she had a deeper connection with Ed because Henry actually was dating and having friends, and I don't think that she actually regretted losing Henry or the fact that he died, was killed by Ed, because I think she would rather see her children dead than happy. And so, you know, I think Ed's lack of concern for humans, or any emotions that he might have felt for human life, had to do with his upbringing by his mother talking about how bad other people were.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just a very, very twisted, and I think the story of Ed Gein really will have a lasting effect on American popular culture. And I mean, like I said, Psycho and all these other movies coming in regards to you know, some of the documentaries, and there's actually what about the Rob Zombie film House of a Thousand Corpses? Did that have anything to do with Ed Gein? Because they're bringing that in regards to different stories that maybe have links to him.
If you've seen the movie, no, it does not have anything to do with Ed Gein. Ed Gein did not have a young girl stripping on the couch. No, it's well,
there's another one you may not know that they said that Gein served as a model for several books and films. This one being the Buffalo Bill character in Silence of the Lambs.
That's what I touched on when I said Hannibal.
Right, but I'm talking about
in the last interview I said Silence of the Lambs. I didn't mention this time.
But it was Buffalo Bill, that guy that was.
It was also Hannibal Lecter, because Hannibal Lecter was a cannibal.
Right,
which Ed Gein was a cannibal.
But that guy that kept women with his little white poodle. Yeah, that was. And then there's also another TV series, American Horror Story Asylum, as well. So there's been a lot of films that kind of use Ed Gein as a basis, and then there's actually a song from a Slayer album, Dead Skin Mask, 1990.
Yeah, well, that song sucks. But anyway,
okay.
And I'm a Slayer fan, but I don't like that song.
Okay.
But, you know, I'm more about 80s Slayer, like, you know, Rain and Blood and stuff of that nature. But yeah, I never liked Dead Skin Mask. But yeah, Ed Gein was a great person. Man, who would have been a better president, Obama or Ed Gein?
I don't
Ed Gein.
Why would that be?
Because Obama tried to run this country into the ground.
Okay. Well, like I said, Ed Gein was, to me, a very, very lost soul that was really brought up in a very secluded, rundown Wisconsin farmhouse. That his mother really kind of ruled it with an iron fist.
Great American legend, and he's not really a legend, but I guess hero would be Ed Gein. I know that's a screwed up way to look at it, but that's the way I look at it. I mean, obviously I had some kind of interest in Ed Gein to write the book, and so very like you said, I would have liked to sit down and had dinner with him or whatever and talk to him about, his thoughts on, just what was he going to, like, I mean, would he want to worldwide market his furniture and sell it?
And I think,
Or
this,
cereal bowls.
right, but I think this is another prime example. I know we touch on various forms of religion in a lot of these podcasts, and, this is really, he was a product of a religious fanatic mother who really took it to the extreme and really was the death of her children. I mean, she really made him who he was, unfortunately, because she tried to steer him right, so she thought, but she actually caused Ed Gein to be what he was. And it's a very, very sad case when you have a parent that should be institutionalized and is allowed to ruin their children's lives.
And I've been sent pictures of a paranormal. There's a girl has a young child, and they go around and they do paranormal investigations. Her name's Kelly Kablowski, and she's sent me pictures of investigations she's done at Ed's grave where there's lots of activity.
Unbelievable. And I read some of the things that went on in the household. Another one that I missed is he had a ceiling light pole that consisted of human lips. So that's taking it to the extreme. But I mean, he thought he was creating art.
Yeah, he's a very good artist. Michelangelo, Ed Gein, Picasso, right in there.
Well, he even made socks out of human flesh. So socks. So he was trying to do all the attire, and he even had shrunken heads. So, I mean, I'm a fan of shrunken heads, but I don't think I would...
And that goes back to my theory that he abducted and killed people. Because if you look at the amount of graves that he said to have robbed, or they could prove the bodies were missing, if you look at what they found in the home, in the crime scene, there was way more body parts than would have just came from the 2 to 3 people they suspect him of killing, and the amount of people that he dug up. And so I believe that the number of people that he killed would actually be higher. I put it in the range of 15 to 20 people. So.
And I'm just wondering too. I mean, I think it's pretty sad that people would come and chip off parts of his gravestone.
That's awesome. I mean, who wouldn't do that?
The bulk of it actually was stolen in 2000.
I mean, if you're going to go all the way out there to chip off a piece of the gravestone, why wouldn't you just take the whole damn stone? But you got to realize the gravestone was just a stone with Ed's name in it. Ed didn't have nothing to do with it. Ed didn't carve it. It was put there by somebody else. So these people kind of like are stupid, because if you wanted a piece of Ed, why not go out to his land, dig up some soil, and take that? That's much more of a connection to Ed, because you could have go to where the old barn, because the house is burnt down now, but you could have went to where the old barn was and dug up some soil there, and I can guarantee you would have caught some supercharged soil with spiritual energy because of the amount of blood that was drained there. A lot better than going to, that's like if I write on a piece of paper the name Ed Gein, and people come and they want to tear off a piece of that paper. Well, what the hell are the good, what is that piece of paper to Ed really?
I don't know. And I mean, there's been a lot of documentaries and a lot of films. Have you seen any of the films or documentaries about Ed Gein? There was one made in 2000 about the story of Ed Gein.
I don't really refer to a lot of those because they suck. Kane Hodder played as Ed Gein in one. It had nothing to fucking do with Ed Gein. The story did not even resemble Ed Gein in any way, shape, or form. And it was just, you use the name that people might know to try to sell a movie that does not have, because the damn writers of this film are too fucking lazy to go do the research.
Well, yeah, because there's been
But now my book's out, and now they can purchase the book and maybe negotiate with me on shooting a film.
Yeah, because a lot of serial killers, Gacy, Bundy, Dahmer, they've all had films, whether they be good or not. I don't think most of them are worth their grain or their
But
salt.
if there is any other filmmakers out there that want to co-produce an Ed Gein film with me, let me know, because I am going to get back into horror films again. And I would like to do it true to the form and, you know, just really show like some hardcore fucking between him and his mother, because that's the reality. But if you buy a book that's written by a professor, they're only going to give you the facts of the crime scene and stuff like that. they're gonna leave out certain facts that are considered not worldwide marketable. They're only going to give you facts to where they can sell their book because they're only concerned about money. So if you buy a book written by a professor, you're probably going to miss half the story, and half the story being that he did have an intense sexual relationship with his mother.
And, when she did die, he was actually 39 years old when she died, and it said for the first time in his whole life he was truly alone. And that was a frightening prospect for him, that even at age 39 he had never been alone in his whole life, and now he had,
because his dad was dead, he killed his brother, and then now his mom's dead. That's why he dug her up and put her in the house in the room.
And I don't know if this is true or not, if you've made reference that it says later he was actually diagnosed as suffering from schizophrenia. That's when he was going through the mental analysis for his trial.
Well, you know what, you got to realize they were trying to justify it because they didn't want to put him in prison. And that speaks to the community as well that he came from, the fact that they found out that he was doing all these horrible things, and but yet they didn't want to put him in prison. They tried to rehabilitate him. They put him in a mental health hospital. They put him in a insane asylum. They were trying to rehabilitate the man, and so they were diagnosing him with whatever to try to rehabilitate him, and eventually they wanted him to be free. But I don't think he never really wanted to be free because, like you said, the conditions he was living in, the fact that he was alone and having to find corpses to bring with him or people to kill to not feel alone. When he got into the hospital type of situation, he was allowed to wear his own clothes, civilian clothes if he wanted, and he had a room, and it's a lot better than jail, So he lived back then, in the mental health hospitals back then were pretty good,
Well, you have to admit, I'm sure in small towns there was talk of some kind of a weird relationship with the mother and son where, the people in town must have thought it was pretty strange, pretty weird, because even back in the day, most women, if you were a widow, you would remarry to help support yourself and your children, or even a young man of Ed Gein's age, to not have a girlfriend, that would be pretty strange in itself. And I'm sure there was questions behind their backs, or there's people whispering, so I think the town knew the reality of the relationship between mother and son. To say they didn't, they're a bunch of liars. That's all I can say. So, they were party to that. I'm sure they could have maybe stepped in and found out what was going on, because he did exhibit strange behavior while he was going to school. They could have sent somebody there to investigate child welfare or whatever. So they're just as to blame as the mother is.
I don't know how good child welfare was in the farming community of Wisconsin at that time.
They were still out there. They were still there.
During the 50s?
Absolutely.
In Wisconsin? I don't know.
Everywhere.
In the farming communities? I don't really know.
Well, if people go to church or people go to school and they're acting weird, there's going to be always some old lady that's going to make a fuss about it and complain to authorities saying, I think there's something strange going on at that farm. You should send the sheriff to go take a look. There's always one or two of those ladies that are gossip mongers.
Well, that's true. And so, like I said, the point of this podcast was to speak on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre not happening in Texas, because I ran into too many Texans who swear up and down it did, and it did not. Not only that, Leatherface lived in Plainsville, Wisconsin. So, Ed Gein. Again, click the link at the bottom, in the description at the bottom, if you'd like to purchase a real crude, hardcore, in-your-face look at Ed Gein. And it's got a lot of pictures in there that is not recommended for children.
They're crime scene pictures, are they not? They're actual, authentic crime scene photos of, I think, one of the bodies that was dressed like a deer.
But it's that's what we covered in the beginning. But the importance to recognize is that you get the whole story there, not just part of the story.
You're not just getting the gossip, and you're not just getting the gory. You're going to get the whole
truth.
The truth of...
Because I don't care if it's worldwide marketable, kicked out of certain stores. I don't care. I just wanted to put it in your face, hardcore. It's the way it is. This is what happened, and this is the details. And I didn't sugarcoat nothing so that my book could be in certain stores. I'm already on BarnesandNobles.com. I'm already on Amazon. This book is there in both places, and it's in other outlets and stores as well. But I don't give a shit if it sells overseas or not. I really don't care. My thing is, I wanted to write it. I'm an American author. I'm a horror filmmaker, and I'm a horror historian. I'll call myself a horror historian, if you will, because I do bring you the shocking true story of Ed Gein.
And like I said, like every legend, there's always truth behind it. So this is your true inside look into a real life person.
Yeah.
A very sad real life person that came, did horrific things based on an upbringing that wasn't the greatest.
So the next Texan that wants to tell me that it happened here in Texas because they can go see the house that the movie was filmed in, you'd be better off to pick you up a cow pile out of the pasture and start eating it before you get in that conversation.
Well, not eating it, but did you not know this, for people that quickly that out there, that if you dry a cow patty and you burn it, it keeps mosquitoes and bugs away? That's from a farmer.
Yeah, and that would be you. So that's it for this one. So again, click the link, and if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel
and
so you don't
share
miss
the
anything.
bloody podcast. Please share it.
Go back and look at our investigations on the videos as well. We actually have investigation videos, a lot of videos actually. I think there's over 100 videos on our channel, so go check. Not all of them are podcasts. And you got to keep in mind, YouTube is not the only platform where this is viewed or listened to. Spreaker.com, YouTube, iTunes, things of that nature. So just like, subscribe, and click the link if you want to purchase an awesome book. That's it.
Take care.